Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us this morning. We're very excited to present to you the panel titled, What is the Most Interesting Scope of AI for Business? So today, I have with me experts in the field with a wealth of experience that we're looking forward to digging into today. Here to my left, I have Parker Crockford, Director of Strategic Accounts at Phaedo, a company working to verify individuals at the speed of life, and we're looking forward to Parker telling us a bit more about that shortly. We have Jasper Maceman, Principal at Holdspring Ventures, focused on software investment and AI investment, and has invested in up to 5 AI companies at this point, so some pretty interesting experience there as well. We have Sonia Zillner, who's a senior key expert and longtime AI researcher, and she's responsible for the European AI strategy at Siemens. And we have Susana Del Pozo, cloud and cognitive technical sales leader at IBM, focused on Spain, Portugal, and Israel. So as we begin to dive into this session, I mean, really the goal of today's talk is to highlight kind of the scale, the volume, the variety, and the speed at which businesses can extract data, analytics, automation through processes, potential customer engagement and employee advantages. But all these opportunities bring pretty pertinent questions as well in terms of the strategic positioning of organizations. What factors and criteria are immediately taken into account? How do companies, whether startups or larger organizations, focus on the broader collaborative ecosystem to really extract value out of the potential of artificial intelligence? So today, really let's get this going with no further ado. And I'd like to just start with Parker, since you're here on my left. So Parker, I understand that you have some very interesting experience at the intersection of the public and private sectors in terms of that emerging type of value. Can you tell us a little bit about your current projects and kind of how those total line between those spaces?
Yeah, no, of course. So where Phaedo finds ourselves is we're creating and driving sort of the digital identity revolution when it comes to helping our clients identify their users in remote settings. And the way that we do that and what we've built is we take an image of a government ID and we build models around that to enable our users and our clients to verify themselves at scale. And so it's an interesting universe that we sit at because we're taking a government-backed, publicly issued credential or your government ID, and then we're having to build a way to be able to, in an automated format, to be able to verify that at scale in a very robust, let's say accurate, so prevention of fraud, and then giving a high completion rate. But the challenge that we have in this scenario is we support over 190 countries globally, and that's 4,500 different document types. So if I say we support US driver's licenses, that's 50 states times around 4 to 5 different government IDs in the wild that we have to be able to process within 20 to 30 seconds for our clients in their onboarding. So it puts us at a sort of critical place within a user experience, but we're having to be dependent on a very public-facing, let's say, government ID where you don't necessarily have access to the direct attributes off of it, or being able to get to say, look, this is what actually a real ID looks like. So it takes a lot of challenges, but what we're attempting to do with AI is to be able to take a human document expert to scale.
Okay, fantastic. And one of the things that kind of brings up is the necessity of the global collaborative ecosystem, including the private sector, public institutions, and others, in kind of making sure that AI is an effective reality for businesses. Sonia, as the kind of the responsible for the European strategy around or for Siemens, could you explain to us a little bit about some of your experience in developing and engaging with that collaborative ecosystem?
Sure. So the ecosystem is very central. So this is basically what we try to boost here. We need an ecosystem in order to bring the AI innovation forward. The reason is because it's so complex, and usually, as you have explained, it's like the AI functionality is like this, but then you need to change the processes and the digitalization of the processes. So always like many players are involved. So the question is more or less like, how can you bring all these players together? And this is some of the work we're currently doing in the context of the European, with the European Commission. So we have been invited to compile a new European AI strategy for a new AI public-private partnership. And it's not Siemens, it's like there are two associations in place. It's like the Big Data Value Association with about 200 members in the AI arena, and the EU Robotics, which are representing the robotics world. And now we're trying to bring all these people together and compile a strategy. And one of the main issues now is the ecosystem building. So we are also trying to involve more with the startups. So they are very central in terms of bringing the innovation to the business. And it's about also understanding how all the technology works together. So how we can find common languages, that all the different technology areas easily work together. And this is not only the AI technology, but also the technologies, the enabling technologies. So we need to understand the interfaces to Internet of Things. We need to understand the interfaces to security. So you want to have your ID be secured. And all the others, like how high-performance computing, just to name other ones. So basically focusing here how all the communities work together, that the technology which we are developing comes faster to the market, and that we are engaging in this area.
Okay, yeah. Fantastic. And so one of the traditional questions, particularly for startups, the robust startup community around AI, as we see here at South Summit, is around assessing low-hanging fruit, right? Do we integrate AI solutions that kind of enhance existing business processes that are gradual, or do we drastically transform our potential business models to hopefully engage more competitively, right? Susanna, as having worked at IBM with cognitive solutions and with extensive experience in startups, can you tell us what are some of the key criteria and challenges that startups have to assess when looking at their approach to AI solutions?
Well, we have found different challenges in startups, but not only in startups, also in big companies. One of the challenges is to look at artificial intelligence only from a technological point of view. Because companies think in a use case, whatever, they just start to play with that, they develop an application, but they do not think what is coming next. And that is one of the key challenges we are finding, that you have to think in a strategy, you have to think how it's going to grow, how you are going to industrialize it if the idea is successful, that hopefully will be. And this is something that has to be thought from the beginning. Another challenge that we have seen in several customers, and as I said, this is valid for small and for big companies, for startup or established business, is the data. Because artificial intelligence is nothing if you don't have the data that you are going to leverage. And we see that most companies, they don't know where is their data, or even worse, they do not trust their data. Why? Because data is easy to copy, to move, to change, and it's difficult to know that you are using the real data, that your data has the quality you need to have a trustful AI deployment. That is why in IBM we say there is no AI without IA, which is there is no artificial intelligence without information architecture. So the information is key, and to have a system when you have governance of your data so you can trace the source of the whole system that it's your information.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a challenge on what you just said there is also from the startup perspective is you have to take privacy and have that privacy framework on your side of the business really sort of flesh out much sooner, I think, in a growth trajectory. Because between GDPR and things happening with privacy around the world and all the data hacks and everything that's happening, it's the startups that need that data to be able to build what they're creating, but then set it up in a way that they're meeting all the correct regulatory standards to even get where they need to go to build. And I think it's even 2 years ago wasn't as much of a problem as it is today when it comes to how do you get that data and be able to train a model with it.
Okay, fantastic. So Jasper, as an investor in the space of artificial intelligence and having invested in several companies, can you tell us a little bit about it's kind of a reiteration of my question to Susanna, but what type of criteria are you using to assess the quality or the interest of companies that are engaging with AI and have the potential to scale up their approach to AI in the short to midterm?
It's an endless, always changing list of criteria, but I think what is very key, and you all mentioned it, so for machine learning, which is mostly the case of the application that we see, we look at two things. One is the team actually capable of doing this in practice? So yes, you do a lot of research at university, learn a lot of stuff, but have you actually worked with data? Have you learned how to annotate data, how to really understand data? So is there experience in the team? And the other one is how proprietary is the data, or at least, let's say, the annotation part of it. Because there's a lot of publicly available data. ESA, for example, the European Space Agency, has a nice program, but actually understanding what that data means is pretty much key, and you can build a data mode there, not just from the data. So I would say those two basic ones. And then the third one, and that's pretty tough for us because we invest in seed stage, but we can invest up to 50 million in a company, and I know that's nothing in comparison to an R&D budget of Siemens, but it's not that much money. But we have to understand, is this actually possible? Because a lot of AI or machine learning is still research. I mean, you basically have a hypothesis, and then you're testing it, and then after 2 years, you tell your VC, sorry, it didn't work. So for us, that's the really tough part, understanding is there a possible outcome with this kind of approach.
Okay, fantastic. As you mentioned, I mean, a large part of AI is research, and Sonia, I know you have several years of experience as an AI researcher. You mentioned to me before that before AI, it wasn't really called AI until it had kind of a commercial tone to it. You tell us a little bit, comment a bit on that evolution.
Say it again?
Can you comment a bit on kind of that evolution of this AI?
I mean, in terms of AI technology, it was like when I started to do this, I wouldn't say it's AI because it was like the AI winter, and now everybody's doing it. Like years ago, when I wanted to engage our business units, they would never have time for us because we were doing some exotic thing, and now it's very easy. It's very easy. Everybody would like to do it, and we as AI experts, they like to work with us because they think we are the ones who can find something out. But to be honest, I very agree what you just said. It's like having a look at the data. You mentioned it as well. It's like the data, the quality of the data tells you what you can do. And it's like when you're thinking about USP, am I different? Can others do the same thing? So I need to really dive into the data and understand what I can find out. Industrial data, it's rather complex. So industrial data, it's like really, actually like the pre-processing, it's no fun. It's like the data is stored in all these different data stores. You do not know them, then you need to find the owner of this database, then you need to integrate, and years before, very different format, very different structure, you have to map, all this very boring stuff. So basically it's like many investments or focus is strong on increasing data quality and how can you speed up this process. So whenever I do interviews with my business units and I see that they have understood how to handle the data, how to increase the quality, then this is something really we push forward. So this is something, a good way forward. If they have not yet looked at the data, this is really difficult because they do not know anything, so they even can't decide which technology they need.
And that's a nice thing for our startups. They build up the data on their own, so you can at least start from a good point.
Yeah, yeah.
But I fully agree. How do you do it with your data experts? I mean, do you get them from the department, or do you guys do it? So how to really understand what the data means? Because
No, we are engaging with the experts. So it's like we try to have a AI expert and a domain expert, and they need to talk to each other. If you let the data expert alone, always the models we come up are too simple, and we are not able to process them. So you need to have a person in mind who understands how the algorithm work, and then they need to engage. They need to find the same language. Sure. They need to come together, find the same language. In order to understand the machine learning, how the concepts and the domain language. And the domains are really complex. It's like you really need to dive in. You need to understand how a gas turbine is functioning. It's like
Okay, interesting. So I had a very general question that I thought would yield some interesting perspectives on what would you consider a good AI strategy. Emerging already from the conversation, I'm hearing a lot about how the data is structured, the ability for different types of experts within functional or cross-functional groups to integrate and communicate with one another. I mean, speak to other people in different functional areas. They might talk about the proprietary value of data, for example. So I know every expert has kind of a different approach on this, but for the for the record, what would you consider a good AI strategy, kind of in direct terms?
I think ours is fantastic, the strategy we deploy as the only startup on the platform. Look, the way, and I think this goes to everything we've said, it comes down to what we're attempting to do is we have a very complex, I don't know the last time anyone looked at their government ID, but they're very complex. And so the goal for us is to take the human to scale and to put the machine in a position to say, look, churn through the data, because 96% of all the documents we see are legitimate documents. It comes down to image quality and a whole series of pieces. And then we have a human in the loop that we then put them in a spot to say, you're always maturing that model and you're making the decisions and we're removing the noise out from away from the expert. And so for us, there's always going to be new documents coming out. There's always going to be models to mature. There's always going to be these things that are happening. So the strategy we've always taken is saying we're never just going to be machine only. We're never going to be human only. We're always going to have that constant feedback loop to build out sort of that proprietary technology that comes with years of seeing these documents, seeing these fraud trends, and all these other pieces. And so starting from the beginning to say, how can we make a human expert, that domain expert, go to scale? Let's remove as much as we can, but with the realization it's never going to be 100% automated. And best case scenario, we can get into the high 90s, but you will always want a human looking at those edge cases, because the machine can't do it. And so it gives that completion rate, but also then gives the sort of us humans, we get bored, we're not going to give you the right results always. And so it's, again, trying to put everyone in a lane that they're actually really good at. And so it's that constant sort of feedback loop. So that's why I say our strategy is the best.
I would add two things to that. So I also love that because we call it human-machine hybrid. And basically the strategy for a startup, although it's more tactical, is at the beginning to look if you want to optimize for precision or recall. So it really depends on what is important for the product, and actually you're focusing more on the outcome for the customer than the real machine learning around it. And then the second part is over time, and you said it, is automating all that. But then, and that's, I would say, really a strategy for most of our startups where we put a lot of budget in, is have constant research on that. Because all the startups, at least in our portfolio, are a bit afraid that then suddenly there's this new thing coming up and then it disrupts the whole process because it automatically annotates data or whatsoever. So we have dedicated R&D budgets, even in the very small companies, 1 or 2 people, maybe even 5, constantly reading papers, constantly trying new models in parallel to the process, so you can put it live if it's performing better. So I think that's a good strategy.
Fantastic.
I mean, if I add on this, because you're talking now from a startup perspective, I'm not talking from a corporate perspective, the AI strategy is really difficult. Because it's you need to identify business opportunities, new markets, and then when there is a transformation of a sector, and you need to identify what is possible. So what needs to be done? When we talk do it bottom up. So we try to find all the ideas that people have, so all the AI projects that people are doing. And this is like a snowball system. So we ask one, and then we ask, do you know more? And it's like getting like more and more and more and more. But then maybe they do not have so they like their technology, they really put it forward, but is that business case? So then you map it to the strategy again and where you want to go into it. So basically, I think, I mean, for sure we can put something on PowerPoints in terms of strategy, yeah? But the real case is that we need to connect the people. We need to connect the people. So we need to make sure that they keep on talking to each other, that the domain expert need to get access to it. And this is the most important strategy to move forward because it's so agile and it's moving so fast. and that this is what is working.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have seen the same, and the way we are fostering that, this communication, we have an innovation space that we call IBM Garage, when we use design thinking and we mix people from the business side, from the technological side, so they are all in the same room, thinking together what they would like to do, but also what it's possible to do, how they can start maybe with an MVP to test the technology to see if it works, and to decide together if they are going to spread that through the company, for example. So it's important to have all of them in the same room, thinking together, looking at the near future, but also thinking in the long term. So they are all together developing this strategy. It's not that part of the company designs the strategy and then they leave it to the other side of the company to build it. They are all together since the beginning.
Okay,
And
fantastic. I know, Suzanne, you mentioned to me, like, say, some interesting examples of these adoption processes of AI solutions within startups and in enterprise, and how they've successfully worked, kind of taking into account all that we've been chatting about. Do you mind sharing, one of those examples for us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have seen it. Let's be positive, and we have seen it very successful in many customers. In fact, with our artificial intelligence solution that it's called IBM Watson, we have done more than 25,000 projects in 20 different sectors all around the world. So very different applications in big corporates and startups, for example. To give you some cases, I will mention 4 different applications. Here in Spain, for example, we have a banking customer, CaixaBank. They are using artificial intelligence to provide their 10,000 employees with a virtual assistant that helps them answer the questions of their customers. And we estimate that this year, this virtual assistant will answer around 10 million questions. So we are talking about big numbers. In a very different sector, the industrial sector, we are working, for example, with Kone, that it's a worldwide leader in manufacturing and maintenance of elevators. And we have infused AI, so the million of elevators they have all around the world, they can literally talk in natural language with a control center and tell this center when they detect an anomaly. So imagine what it means in terms of preventive maintenance. We are working also with a company in India, iCare, to help in the diagnosis of people that has high risk of having heart attacks in rural areas, which was a problem. And also, if I come back to Spain, for example, and talking about the startups, there is one case that I like a lot. This is a Spanish startup called QAI. They have developed a system based off IBM Watson in artificial intelligence to detect and prevent bullying in schools. And they have made the interface is a robot, because they have found the children talk very open to a robot because they don't feel judged. And there is an artificial intelligence system behind that can detect when the student is suffering bullying. So very different examples and very different ways of defining the strategy. In some cases, it was a big corporate seeing how they can improve their processes. Yeah. In the last one, it was an entrepreneur that was watching TV. He saw a news that was sad about bullying in a school, and he decided to use artificial intelligence to create a company.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you for sharing those examples. So we have just about 2 minutes left, but we have a lot more to talk about, I think. But I'd like to touch on, and I'd like to get kind of everybody's perspective briefly on near-term key trends across the ecosystem, for the range from startups to enterprise to even public institutions. Kind of what do you see as the key emerging trends for near-term AI adoption?
Yeah, I think the trend that we're seeing from our side is how privacy is affecting one, how you build your startup if you're using PII, someone's personal information, and 2, having those coming from spending the last 2.5 years in the US, having the right consent flows of being able to actually do something with that third-party data. I think it's going to put some more hurdles in place for startups to be able to get the information or the data they need to actually sort of take a thesis and execute it if it is more personal-based information. Because we've seen, when a company wants to trial our services, it's become a much harder process, and they don't have the ability to actually get the data because they haven't put the right frameworks in place to be able to share it with us for us to go test. So I think that's going to be interesting, let's say, headwind for certain types of AI that we're starting to see from our side.
Yeah. I would have two things. One is more in an area that's natural language understanding, so you really see a lot of progress there, and it's moving away from just pattern recognition of what is in a text or in a context, but really understanding the intent of it, really putting it into perspective so you can process it automatically and get insights for products of all kinds. And the second part is transfer learning, but it's more, for example, federated learning. The thing is, most of the companies, when they create products with machine learning, they build models for each individual case, and then maintaining all these models for various customers when you grow, it's not fun. So how do you transfer the learning of one model to another? Then we come to data privacy again. So how you do that? And there are a lot of nice approaches that are actually working, but it's fairly new field. So we see a lot of good progress there.
Great.
So I see for bringing AI to business scenarios, so I see the importance to speed up the way to integrate domain knowledge, like knowledge graphs and stuff like this, to ways to present knowledge in order that we can capture the knowledge which is already around and to combine it with data-driven approaches. And the other thing I see, it's like all this trustworthiness. So this is like very important for adopting the technology. And I see the most exciting innovations coming when these technology comes together, like when machine learning meets knowledge graphs and then the natural language processing meets the deep learning. So it's like it's when the technologies are combined. This is like a very promising area to look at.
Fantastic.
Well, we are definitely going to see artificial intelligence moving from pilots, from the small deployments to taking to be embedded in really critical business processes. And for that, I agree with Sonia, we need to trust it. And for that, we will see how all the companies pay attention on making AI explainable. It cannot be a black box to make it ethical, to work in removing bias. In IBM, we have a strong ethical code for artificial intelligence, and we are seeing that more and more the market is paying attention to that.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, it looks like we're out of time for this session, but first I'd like to give a round of applause to our panel.